Welcome to the deep dive, everyone. Get ready, because
Yes.
today we're going deep into a case study that's both fascinating and really makes you think.
Yeah, it's a real head scratcher.
So picture this. You're a vet, and a 13-year-old border collie comes in. And this dog has a whole bunch of neurological symptoms.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, we're talking weakness in the hind legs,
Okay.
lethargy, a head tilt, trouble with coordination, like the whole works, you know?
Yeah, it sounds like a dog who's really struggling. So where do you even begin with something like that?
Right. And to make things even trickier, the initial tests, they kind of hinted at a possible tumor in the thyroid gland.
Oh, interesting.
And there was this concern that it might have spread to the central nervous system.
I see. So like a metastatic tumor situation.
Exactly.
Given for all those neurological symptoms, it would make sense, right? I mean, depending on where the lesions are.
Yeah, it seemed plausible. So to get a clearer picture, they did an MRI.
Makes sense.
And what they find? A mass in the right thyroid gland, along with multiple nodules
Nodules. Where?
in the cerebellum
Okay.
and the spinal cord.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And were these just like random nodules? Or is there something specific about them?
Well, they lit up on the contrast, which suggested that they were active.
Oh, so potentially malignant.
Yeah. So at this point, it really looked like thyroid carcinoma that had spread to the nervous system.
Right. Seems pretty straightforward.
Yeah, you'd think so.
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
But here's where it takes a turn. Sadly, the dog's prognosis wasn't good,
Oh, no.
and the difficult decision was made to euthanize him.
I see.
But the owners, they consented to a post-mortem exam.
To get some more definitive answers.
Yeah, to really see what was going on.
Good for them.
Yeah.
It can be hard to say yes to that when you're grieving, but it's so helpful in these cases.
Absolutely. And that's when things got really, really interesting.
Yeah.
Because it turns out this wasn't just one type of tumor spreading.
Oh,
The postmortem histopathology, it revealed not one,
okay.
not two, but three completely distinct tumor types.
Wait, 3?
Three different types of tumors in one dog.
Wow. That's incredible.
It's incredibly rare. Like, there were only a handful of documented cases in all of veterinary medicine.
I can imagine. And were those other cases similar, like with 3 different tumors?
Well, even the ones that have been documented, those were limited to brain tumors,
Aha.
not spinal cord tumors, which we saw in this case.
So this really is unique. It wasn't just metastasis. It was 3 separate unrelated cancers.
Yeah, at the same time, it's a total game changer.
It really makes you think. So, like, what even leads to a situation like that?
That's the burning question, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
But before we even think about the causes, let's break down these tumor types. Like, what exactly were we dealing with here?
Okay, sure. So first, you had the thyroid follicular carcinoma.
Right,
This was found in the thyroid gland.
right.
And, they confirmed it by the presence of thyroglobulin-positive neoplastic cells.
Okay, so that confirms the initial suspicion of the thyroid cancer, but then there was a meningioma too, right?
Yeah, exactly. And this one, it was an intradural extramedullary tumor.
Okay,
And it was attached to the C3 nerve root in the cervical spinal cord.
got it.
We identified it by the presence of E-cadherin-positive cells.
Okay, and E-cadherin, that's like a specific protein, right? Helps you classify the tumor.
Exactly.
And the third tumor, what was that one?
That one was a histiocytic sarcoma.
Histiocytic sarcoma.
Yep. And this one was interesting because it presented as multiple intramedullary lesions in both the cervical and the lumbar spinal cord.
Wow.
And we identified it using a marker called EBA1.
EBA1. Okay, so 3 different tumor types, each with their own thing going on.
Yeah.
But here's what I find fascinating. Those initial imaging results, they seem to point to metastasis.
Right.
Pretty straightforward. But then the histopathology, it just showed a way more complex picture.
Absolutely. It's a good reminder that imaging, it can be super helpful. But it doesn't always tell the whole story.
No.
Sometimes you really need that microscopic examination to get the full picture.
It's almost like looking at a completely different case, you know?
Yeah, I know what you mean.
So in this case, that post-mortem exam, absolutely crucial.
Yeah.
It's like a reminder that even when things seem clear-cut, there could be more to the story.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And this case is like the perfect example of that. It really challenges how we think about things,
Okay.
Highlights how complex cancer can be, and really emphasizes the need for like thorough investigation. You can't just assume anything.
I'm sure this has some pretty big implications for how vets approach similar cases in the future.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So what do you think are the key takeaways here? Like, what should vets be thinking about when they encounter a case like this?
Well, first of all, it shows just how important histopathology is. Like, even with MRI, it's not always enough.
Yeah,
It's like trying to solve a puzzle, but you only have half the pieces.
exactly. And in this case, those missing pieces only showed up with the histopathology.
Yeah, the microscopic examination, that's where it all came together.
So even when imaging suggests a specific diagnosis,
Yeah,
got to keep an open mind, right?
absolutely. Especially with these complex neurological cases, multiple things can be happening at once.
Even if the signs seem to point in one direction. Makes you wonder about the causes.
Oh, yeah. What could lead to a dog having 3 different types of cancer simultaneously? That's the crux of the matter, isn't it?
We don't know enough about cancer in animals.
We really don't. Could be genetics, environment, who knows, right? Probably a bit of everything.
A mix of factors. So much more research needed.
Yeah, for sure. To figure out why some animals are just more prone to this kind of thing.
And if there's anything we can do to prevent it.
Exactly. Early detection is so important, but we need to know what to look for.
Let's say all 3 tumor types were found while the dog was still alive. Would treatment even be possible?
That's a tough one. Even with early detection, treating 3 different cancers at the same time, that's a huge challenge.
I imagine each tumor would need a different approach, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Surgery, maybe radiation, chemo, it all depends on the tumor, the location, and the dog's overall health, of course.
And then you have to think about side effects.
Oh, absolutely. How the treatments might interact with each other, the impact on the dog's quality of life, it's a lot to consider.
It's a really tough situation.
It is. Even if treatment were an option, it would be a long, difficult road with no guarantees.
This case is tragic, but it teaches us some important lessons.
It really does. It reminds us to be thorough, to know the limits of our tools, and to keep researching cancer in animals. We need to understand it better.
And the importance of teamwork. Clinicians and pathologists working together.
Absolutely. Sharing their expertise, looking at all the evidence, that's how we get the full picture.
And hopefully use that knowledge to help other animals in the future.
Exactly. That's the goal. This case might have had a sad ending, but what we learned from it can help us do better. Diagnose earlier, treat more effectively, and maybe even prevent this from happening in the first place.
This deep dive has been quite a journey, hasn't it? We started with what seemed like a simple metastasis case and ended up with 3 different tumors. Really makes you think.
It does. It shows that in vet med, just like in human medicine, there's always more to learn, always something new to discover. And sometimes the cases that surprise us the most, those are the ones that teach us the most valuable lessons.
It's funny, as we've been talking about this case, I keep thinking back to those initial MRI findings.
Oh, yeah.
Those nodules in the cerebellum and the spinal cord, the ones that lit up with the contrast.
Right, the ones that initially made us think malignancy.
Yeah, exactly. At the time, it seemed so obvious that those were metastases from the thyroid carcinoma.
Totally. It fit the picture, especially with the dog's symptoms.
Right. But now we know there were actually 3 separate tumors. So it makes you wonder if those nodules on the MRI were even all the same type of tumor.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's totally possible that some of those nodules could have been the meningioma or even the histiocytic sarcoma, just looking like metastases on the scan.
So even though the MRI gave us some clues, it couldn't tell us for sure what kind of tumor each one was.
Exactly. This case really highlights how important the histopathology is. Especially in these complex cases, it's the only way to know for sure what you're dealing with.
It's a good reminder that even with all the technology we have, we don't always have all the answers right away.
Yeah, sometimes the answers are hidden deeper, within the tissues themselves, and you need that microscope to see them.
It just shows how crucial it is for clinicians and pathologists to work together.
Absolutely. You need both the clinical observations and the pathology findings to really understand what's going on.
This case is a perfect example of that.
It is. And it has the potential to change how we approach things in vet med moving forward.
In what way?
Well, for one thing, it reminds us that we can't always assume a case is simple, even if it looks that way at first. There could be multiple tumors involved, even if the initial signs point in one direction.
So we always have to keep an open mind.
Exactly. And hopefully this case will inspire more research into multiple cancers in animals. The more we know, the better we'll be able to diagnose and treat these complex cases.
And maybe even prevent them altogether.
Right. This deep dive has been incredibly interesting and thought-provoking. It's a reminder of how complex vet med can be, but also how much we're still learning and how much potential there is for the future.
Well said. From vet neurojar Keep those minds inspired, hearts light, and tails wagging.